just to give you an example, in London, the objective is now to electrify all buses and taxis in London by 2030. There will be more than 40 gigawatts of batteries in there. It's just an example. And also, there is also this, in the UK and the countries also to do with the decarbonization of the heat, because we use gas to produce heat. And it's also something which is now getting on the agenda to make that work. And the core issue is about how we're going to manage the balance of demand and supply, and also make sure that we don't overload the infrastructure and the control resources are at the end use level. That's something which is where this is all about. Flexibility is coming from end use level to balance to manage distribution, transmission, and generation assets, and that's where this work is. One of just example you're going to see is also major conflict synergies between local district level objectives and national objectives. That's also one of the big topics. For example, if wind is blowing hard, we want to increase demand to capture wind, but if we increase demand, we may overload the local network. Where is the balance? How it should be done, managed properly. There's also some stuff which kind of our modeling was working upon. And this is just to highlight that for kind of 2030 plus in the UK, we demonstrate if we use these flexibility resources, which is smarter technology, which is development of new technologies, demand response storage, flexible generation, and also, we mentioned this again regarding this. Historically, we've done this work with government and regulatory bodies in the UK. Is also to standards for design of distribution and transmission infrastructure, to take not only into account the networks but also flexibility resources. This is just to illustrate kind of this is just a UK case with the balance with the benefits of flexibility technologies is about £8 billion per year in 2030 plus. And you can see in here that there is operating costs, distribution capex, rest reinforcements of infrastructure and so forth, and also the interconnectors. But the biggest one, which was kind of very relevant, which needs to be fully addressed yet, is that we demonstrate we can actually achieve the carbon target by building less low carbon generation if we make better use of these resources, rather than to have wind and solar and curtail it when it's too much generation. And that's something which is very relevant. And also there is a conventional generation which to do with the peaking stuff as well. But that's something which is very relevant to kind of have in mind that that we need to look at that. That's where kind of focus is. We're providing evidence to government regulatory bodies, and is now being taken into account regarding how the UK should move forward. And also in Europe, we're also working European activities. This is a bit just to highlight very quickly where is this kind of fundamental uniqueness and novelty of this modeling side. That we model. This is district level, which is kind of street level infrastructure, national level and international level infrastructure. That's something which our modeling is providing fundamental new evidence. And the other aspect of this modeling is to do with the timescales. And this modeling looks into the kind of fraction of a second to multiple years. Because now, given this given this reduction in inertia by having renewables in there in the system, is also stability is growing on the agenda. That's where also UK has got big issues because it's island position. That's something which will be in a few years' time is going to be a very big issue in Europe and so on. And also now we need to look at this transition to digitalized energy framework. Not only the physical aspects, because as I mentioned, as I say, for example, redundancy in assets is used for security supply. In distributed networks, we've got twice as many cables than what we need. At the transmission level, we've got 3 times bigger capacity than what's required, because if 2 of them fails, third one will continue, no problem. But that's something which is also kind of relevant to see how now these distributed resources can be used to make that work. That also can also understand also this data-driven control. We do quite a lot of work now in addressing how this artificial intelligence, how secure that is, because in some cases demonstrated is producing wrong results. That's something which is also need to be looked at. This is regarding this again, kind of local and national level just a very quick, go on the details. This is if you use flexibility and we focus on distribution networks, you can see that the benefits, savings of distribution infrastructure is big, while the savings in operating costs is small, because that's what we're doing included. If you look at the transmission focused, then you can see we focus on the management of the system properly. You can see that that this is increasing, but on the other side, the benefits of distribution network infrastructure is smaller. And this is also when you look at the whole system or look at them together, then the benefits are bigger. You can see that we nearly, this benefit in here is bigger than here, but not huge amounts. And also this in here is similar to this one. That's all to have the whole systems approach together, looking to this national level together. That brings very significant benefits. Anyway, this is probably not going into details of this. This is just to kind of again flexibility regarding this, regarding the particular development of the generation aspects. And this is showing, for example, in here. Just look at it here. These are solar, PV, yellow, wind, green, and also the nuclear and CCS are in here. So what we've done in here analysis, for example, to show if there was no flexibility, what is the right answer for decarbonization? And although renewables are half of the price of nuclear, the model decided to forget renewables, just do nuclear, because flexibility is not there. You cannot manage the system properly. It will be more costly. If you got flexibility, which is storage and demand side response, for example, and here you can see that more we have, the nuclear is reducing while wind and solar are increasing. If you got a fully flexible system, then you can see that it's dominated, dominated by kind of solar and wind, and there will be nuclear, but small amount, 3 times less, 4 times less than what would be the case if we don't have flexibility. That's also very relevant to see how we should move forward. This is, again, a little bit of a technical aspect regarding this ancillary services and frequency regulation. That is a very big challenge in the UK, again, because UK is an island. And the issue here is, if there is a loss of, say, a large nuclear station, how we are going to make sure we don't have blackout? And that will require that, because demand and supply now are different, we need to make sure that the frequency stability is there to manage this properly. Then just showing here that, for example, that demonstrating that the costs, kind of operating costs are reducing, because as you know, wind costs have reduced significantly, but while the ancillary services costs are increasing more than 15 times. And the UK is currently, is already kind of, last year there was a 4 times increase in ancillary services, which is to do with the stability of the system. That's also something which is kind of relevant in here to show that, these frequency response services and technologies can be used, and the value is massively increasing. This is just to quickly highlight that value of inertia. So this is kind of showing here 50 hertz, and in here if there is a loss of a big generator, the frequency is dropping, and the also rate of change of frequency, how frequency is dropping is very relevant, because there is a standard in here, and also the frequency mustn't go below 49.2. It needs to be kind of recovered in a minute. And that's something which is now, UK is leading in this area, because I say with the island position is making this work, and linking this frequency, which is a kind of differential equations, with algebraic equations of economics, is also something which we provide some fundamental evidence as to how it should be done. Maybe just to highlight quickly here, there is also big interest in transport sector electrification, and also how that can be used to make the system operating at a lower cost. Just to give an example, for example, we did some work with London Authority, and they gave us the data about the private vehicles, millions of data about when they start, when they stop, and so forth. And it turned out that the vehicles were, on average, 90% of the time stationary. Because people go to work, then park their car, in the office, and in the office, and then after 8 hours they go back home, and again, car is there, But then, if the car is there with massive of these amounts of batteries that can massively support the system. This is just to illustrate, for example, that if we if we use charging structure, so when you stop your car, you plug it in and charge immediately. Overall, per year should be about nearly £600 per year for charging your vehicle. But if you do smart charging, which means that when you stop, for example, as I mentioned, you go to work or you come back home, for example, and you plug in the car there, but you need it to be, you are going to start, at 7 a.m. something like this, so there is a 10 hours or something, time, and you just say when you want this to be fully charged. So it doesn't need to charge immediately; it can charge to balance the system. That is showing that this would reduce the costs for charging your vehicle nearly 6 times. But if we provide vehicle-to-grid services, which is to do, for example, if, as I mentioned, if there is a big nuclear power station failed, then, because there's huge amounts of cars being plugged in, they can inject power for 10 minutes to balance the supply, then to solve the problem. And we demonstrate here that if this is happening vehicle-to-grid, you should get paid nearly £900 per year for charging your vehicle. That's the, if there is lots of grid, then it's smaller, but that's something which is also kind of getting on the agenda in the UK. Also, we've done some work because some of these standards have been developed, many years ago, as to whether how potentially some of these changing of the standards can support and reduce the cost. You can see here if we move from 0.25 hertz per second to 0.5 hertz per second, that would halve the overall costs of ancillary services, which is critically important. And also in here, this to do with the with inertia from wind. Currently, as you may know, that wind, there are going to be lots of wind, but wind doesn't provide inertia to the system. Obviously, there is a rotating mass, but it's not seen by the system because of what? Power electronics. This is just to show that if we potentially make this power electronics so that we can reduce the cost significantly. But that's something which is not yet kind of getting on the agenda, but it is kind of getting to be analyzed, but that's something which is not very relevant regarding stability. The other thing in here is to mention also is to do with this network design, and this is just to illustrate a case to you. If this is kind of a distribution station with 2 transformers of 30 megawatts, demand currently maximum is 30 megawatts, because if one of these fails, the other one can continue supplying the demand. Then you've got the N-1 standard in the distribution level. And you've got N-2 standard in the transmission level, because if 2 fails, no problem can carry out. But if demand increases a bit, so should we do? Shall we build a new transformer here? Or if there is a potential local generator somewhere, can we use that, or storage, or demand side management? This is something which we carried out in the UK a few years ago, final review of the network security standards, so to move from network solutions only to use flexibility resources such as generation, storage, and demand. And that's also something which is now, we developed a model in there which is now used in the UK. How do you compare these solutions on level playing field? That's something which is now happening in the UK in the context that it's not only building assets is what happens, but also using resources. And this is just to illustrate, we did the work kind of in what would the benefits. This is technical, too technical. These are different areas of distribution networks in the UK. There are 14 of them, and in here you can see just a kind of low voltage, which is going to underground or overhead, driven by voltage difficulties and so forth. This is just to show what would be the costs of reinforcement distribution networks if we just use networks rather than flexibility resources. And this is if we've got a digitalized energy framework, you can see this is increasing significantly. That's also something which is now getting on the agenda in the UK, that now this artificial intelligence is getting on the agenda to make that control. Maybe this is how much time I've got?
You have time.
Oh, good, thank you. Yeah, maybe also to mention this kind of some of these flexibility resources. This is technology related phase shifting transformers and pulse, because there was for example, there was a big, still not yet fully sorted, big debates about building wind in Scotland. Scotland, and the question was, will there be more of that? Will be on the east side or on the west side? And because this in here is about 2 billion pounds is this cable, and the question which one should be built? And we demonstrated here that if you use flexibility resources such as here, flexibility transformers and storage, you can actually manage this a little bit between east and west until it becomes clear where the wind is built, east or west, and then you build these big cables. That was something which is also relevant to deal with uncertainties, which is also now we're also discussing this also with the, for example, transport sector certification in London, where the charging station should be, and all that sort of stuff, how they should be built and so forth. It's also very not yet clear, but the plan is to have all these buses and taxis electric by 2030. That's the plan. This is just these flexibility resources. This is a bit technical, can provide these, many of these numbers of services, which is kind of arbitrage. It's just to kind of decide when you use energy, when you exchange energy. Balancing service has to do with the real-time system operation, and also the real-time, but also frequency stability, which is to do with the fractional second time scales. Also reducing the peak demands, also managing network supports, low carbon generation mix to be minimized, also what the option value with this, and also resilience. That's also something which is big on the agenda now, growing. As you may know, there was quite a big blackout in the last 2 years across the globe. This was something which is now on the agenda in the UK, how we're going to move that forward. This is just to kind of quickly show that these flexibility resources, rather than historical was done, historically only doing arbitrage, but if we do balancing, PV support, network support, so you can see that the value is increasing more than 10 times. And that's something which is also very relevant, that these flexibility resources are, should be considered very strongly in the future low carbon system. And that's now, there is also now, there is issues with the market to be developed properly to ensure that this business model flexibility is actually there. And UK is a pretty strong in this area currently. This is just to highlight a little bit an example of storage being used in terms of how many gigawatts is stored, and also in here is what is the price of storage, pounds per kilowatt. And you can see that in here, that if we've got 2015, 2023, 2050 in here, kind of what would be the how much of storage we should build, depending on what the cost is. And the cost is now reducing; it goes to kind of £1,000 somewhere there. So you can see that if that's the case, that we want to have a 15 gigawatts and also 25 gigawatts in 2050, and these are the overall benefits of having this huge amount of storage in there. And also, this is a bit, that these flexibility resources, we demonstrate when you make, all these services, arbitrary but also balancing, that in fact what turned out to be the case, that regarding storage, that if we use, arbitrage only, you can see that blue goes up and down many more times than the red one, which produces also balancing services, which means because there is also lots of benefits, because these frequency regulation services are frequency stability doesn't happen every half hour, but you need to be ready if something happens that you can do that, and that's why this is also important that having a kind of storage, we got and you are at full level, so if there is an output outage, you can inject power immediately. And also, just also to mention that this is something which we've been looking regarding resilience again, is that there is now, we have provided evidence to government regulatory bodies regarding how we should include resilience, and one of the core aspects is to shift from historical approach, which is the kind of megagrids, which is transmission networks, to actually have flexibility at the microgrid level, the district level, and to support that if that happens. So, for example, if, as mentioned to you, if there is a, for example, bad weather event, which was done in Midlands, transmission system failed, London will be out of service. How are we going to make that work? But if we use, as I mentioned, there will be more than 40 gigawatts of batteries there with bus and taxi, so we can use those to actually supply essential demand, so the hospitals go and so forth. So that is something which is very relevant to move to this this concept. And this is something which is this multi-energy microgrids. I don't want to go details, but this is also to illustrate, there is different kind of resources. There is backup generation, CHP, combined heat and power, heat pumps and so forth, gas boilers, energy storage. And also there is electric vehicles, because mentioned buses, taxis and so forth. And also one of the core aspects regarding digitalization is also to differentiate between essential and non-essential demand. That is very relevant. So for example, rather than currently what's happening, if demand if supply is not big enough, some consumers will be completely disconnected and some will be fully connected. Yeah? But what we can do is have everybody connected but reduce the non-essential demand. Maybe I can just give a quick example of kind of a joke on my fault when we discussed this government. I said, on my side, just to give you an example, essential non-essential demand, I said, as long as I'm watching the World Cup final and my laptop and mobile phone are charged, that is what is important for me. Whether my tumble dryer, washing machine works, I don't care. But they've got a 10 times bigger capacity, requirements than only lights and your laptop and mobile phones and telly. Yeah. So that's also which is critically important. That's something which is going on. So this is just to give you a quick example. Won't go into details too much about using electric vehicles to enhance resilience, controlling this storage and so forth. This is just for example here what is saying curtailment of demand. If we've got vehicles being used in here to manage the curtailment of demand, you can see that if you've got 3,000 vehicles, we can reduce nearly to zero this curtailment. You can see in here that just look at this. This in here, the brown one this is non-essential demand, which is essential demand. So you can see in this case both of them are curtailed. But if you've got the flexibility properly done, we can actually reduce significantly curtailment of essential demand, while non-essential demand can be curtailed again. So that is something which is now with this digitalization framework, we are moving forward to make that work. Also, this is a bit maybe too technical to mention, that also we demonstrated that the resilience should be included in the overall system planning, rather than looking in isolation. Just to give you an example, an example is that if we have decarbonization of the heat sector, what are the options? One option is to have heat pumps everywhere, but there is also, which is currently being used, as you may know, is a CHP plant, combined heat and power plant. So we are kind of burning gas, produce electricity, but the heat which is made in there is used for heating water and goes to buildings. Yeah? So if we now have a little bit of that, say 10% of the heat demand decarbonized through this CHP plant, in the future is going to run on hydrogen, for example. That's what's happening now with Siemens. Then, if we lose, as I say, if the transmission system failed on the service, you will have potentially electricity generation in London, which is used for heating as well. And to make that happen, this is demonstrated here that it turned out that it would increase the cost about say 10% in here, but it would increase resilience 20 times. Because if you got generation, you can actually supply essential demand physically by generators. Also, something which is also relevant with other work as well, government regulatory bodies, regarding to look at this whole systems approach, not look at the electricity only in isolation, but look at all of these networks, electricity, hydrogen, gas, heat, cooling networks together, and see how we can manage this resilience included. That's something which is being done here. I won't go too many details. This is just to illustrate. For example, if we do, for example, hydrogen heating based, then these are the costs, high or low flexibility. But what turned out to be the case is that this hybrid system would be the most cost effective, to have a hybrid heat pumps, which is also getting on the agenda too. So, for example, that because also we need to deal with extreme cold conditions. For example, there is what government what it does to have it to include in here is, for example, once in say 10 years time, there may be extremely cold week with the temperature being minus 15 degrees. And that is something which is, kind of how we will deal with it. But what we haven't included in here is the heating events. Because, when we look at this, there was something about heating, there will be kind of, hot weather, I said, hot weather in the UK? No, don't worry about that. But now we need to include that because over the last couple of weeks, few weeks, there was, very, 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 very hot conditions. This is again to show that flexibility resources can significantly reduce your overall costs. But this one is to show how this would impact the consumer bills. You can see in here that the consumer bills, rather than being 800, is going to be 500, which is a kind of 40% reduction in the bills if you go flexibility, but without compromising on service quality and users. All your bill will be cold enough, from the fridge. Don't worry, there won't be, all of that will be sorted out. Also, what is relevant in here is to mention we've got, as you may know, that in the UK and also Northern Europe, the plan is to have a 490 gigawatts of offshore wind. With this work, Met Office provides some analysis of the weather events, and it turned out that once in 10 years' time, there may be no wind or little wind between 6 and 8 weeks. That's what they said. Imagine we build 400 plus gigawatts in North Sea, and there is no wind for 6 weeks. How are we going to deal with that? That's also the hydrogen going to purpose something which is getting on the agenda, and also kind of what the cost of this is. Also, quickly to mention this European. Well, we did work with the European Commission comparing member state-centric approach, every country doing their own thing, versus pro-European wide approach to decarbonization. And it turned out, regarding, we did these 4 topics. One is how much renewable needs to be deployed, what is the adequacy in terms of security of supply, energy sufficiency and balancing, and having these interconnectors. And just to show, for example, that you may know, regarding the renewables, that in Europe, they gave us some data. There were some wind farms in Italy and southern Germany being built running at 10%, less than 10% load factor. If the same turbine was in Scotland or Norway, it would produce 4 times more energy. That was the data they gave us. They also gave us some data. There was quite a lot of solar in north of Finland. If the same solar panel was in Greece or Italy or Spain, produced 4 times more energy. So expecting the physics that north is windy and south is sunny is what is relevant. And according to our analysis, we demonstrated that we can give, Commission gave us the data, so we did analysis showing that if you're going to prohibit-wide approach, we can achieve the carbon target by building 146 gigawatts less renewables, because we make a better use of renewables which are in the right places. There is also capacity market, which is also relevant in terms of how much peaking plant needs to be built, and comparing member state-centric approach versus prohibit-wide approach. And what we've done regarding the UK, we did the work. This was before this European stuff regarding the capacity market in the UK, showed to the government that if we take into account interconnectors with Ireland, France, and Netherlands, we need to build less peaking plant in the UK. There was some savings, and the ministry liked this, reducing spending of the money, so they accepted this. And have you heard about Brexit ever? You know what Brexit was? No, yeah. But after Brexit, I was making a presentation saying UK is the most pro-European country in entire Europe. When it comes to security supply, Brits trust Irish, French, even Dutch. No other member state trusts the Netherlands. That's the fact. This is just to show kind of, saving about 70 billion euros would be saving if we had this, because we need to build 100 gigawatts less peaking plant if you take interconnectors, but that's something which is not yet properly on the agenda. Also, there was also this, the interconnectors can also be used for, should also be used for not only energy exchange, but also exchange of ancillary services, stability, resources. And that this subject will demonstrate there will be massive benefits if we do that. And there was there was demonstration activity with France to use these provision of these services to the UK, and it was very informative and beneficial. That's something which is also relevant that the interconnectors can do both of these things together. This is just to illustrate in here what we demonstrate regarding the EU approach with interconnectors properly being done. We demonstrate that capacity market will be saving about 70 billion euros by 2030. Also, sharing this balance will be 50 billion balancing services. And also, if we actually build 160 gigawatts less renewables, we respect the physics. Notice in South Central, you're going to make 200 billion savings with the programmed approach. And that's something which is relevant. And just to mention, there is also big activity, as I mentioned, there is 490 gigawatts offshore wind in the North Sea. And there is also currently, we've done some work with government and also regulatory bodies, and also a little bit with the Commission as well, is that currently every offshore wind farms are connected individually to the shore. But we demonstrate if we actually use this in an integrated way, so that we would then actually have some of these links between different countries in here, that would make massive savings in terms of the network costs, rather than connecting every individual offshore wind farm to the shore. And that will also linking these interconnectors together with connecting offshore wind farms is also very relevant. So that is something which is critically relevant. And also just to mention here, finish with this, regarding the marketplace, this is just to illustrate how the historical market operation work. We work we've got the center generators, and then suppliers are kind of buying this energy and selling that to the end demand. And we've got a transmission system operator, and distribution. This is extra high voltage, and low voltage, medium voltage, low voltage, and that's kind of how it worked. But now we are moving. We are moving very significant difference to have this market which would include the climate change, also properly energy security, which is not properly done in here, also which are the new technologies in there, and also kind of entering in the market assets. And you can see in here there are different resources of energy, and also connecting that all together, but also having these resources at the end use level to actually provide flexibility to all the system is also very relevant. And that's where these benefits are very significant. That's something which we are providing evidence to government regulatory bodies. In the UK now, you may know, for example, that we've got NESO, National Energy System Operator, which is now running gas and electricity together. That's the only country. That's the only country in the world which does that, and that's something which is very relevant going forward. That's something which we have done. So, and that also we need to move from incremental thinking to strategic thinking, because we are getting definitely that needs to be put on the agenda properly, so that we can move forward. So, yeah, thanks very much indeed. Sorry if this was too long. Thank you. Yeah, I was very happy to discuss that. I know we don't have time now, but maybe a bit later. And also, if you've got any questions, you can also talk
yeah,
in
questions. If you have questions, we can get a few questions. Questions?
I can have.
Yes, please.
Yes, two things. In this whole study analysis, have you also considered the future technology? Let's say, for example, wind. Probably 10 years down the line, we will be moving from the distributed wind systems, like the vertical axis batteries, and go to the rooftop.
Yeah.
That's one. Battery in the storage, have you only considered the battery, or also nowadays people are doing a lot of work in the gravity storage, which is a bulk storage?
Yeah, it should be included, yeah, not fully, but there is a little bit, but not as much as you
Yes.
it should be. Yeah, definitely.
So for this scenario might change a bit.
Yeah, that would increase the benefits
Yes.
of flexibility resources. Absolutely. Yeah. there is also just extreme case, it is not being present here, but we did also, there is also interest in this space-based solar power,
Okay.
which is building, 1,000 kilometers, and then shipping that solar power by, wirelessly to the, to say North Sea, and then building, then putting it with electricity and go to other countries and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
There are big differences, there are big developments in technologies, absolutely.
Any other questions? No questions?
Talk over tea.
Nice. So thank you very much. This is your certification. Sir, maybe we can make a photo in front of them. Yes. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So, now, I think we have two old, one old is old B, it's just in the, each floor is
Level 3.
level 3.
Level 3.
Old B is level 3, it will also start. It is a special session of Professor Dr. Jose Manuel Lopez Guede, and here also in Hall A, we start with the smart grid. Now, Yuli, I think Yuli is here. Yeah. He will talk about the grid-friendly microgrid management with commodity hydrogen storage in the joint electricity market, a multi-agent reinforcement learning approach. So this session will flow, and I think I would like to ask for Dr. Bahsin Saida is here? Okay, so you are the chair for this session also. Maybe you can you have your program, so you can control the flow. Thank you. So these are the presentation. Very nice. This is my business. I hope to have your pleasure.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Professor Dr. Bahsin Saida, former Qadriya, University Morocco. It is my pleasure to share a session on behalf of the Organism Committee. I would like to immediately welcome our speakers. You have 15 minutes allocated for each presentation, and each short